Well, that's a prompt for our conversation segment, which is on standardization of medical laboratories in Nigeria. Let's take this background report by Kenan Dulwe.
Competence in any field is crucial, more so in the health sector where human lives are involved. For medical laboratories, ISO 15189 is a mark of confidence that certifies competence. It is an accreditation that proves a laboratory is dedicated to delivering proficient and quality service across all aspects of its operations. Although this accreditation is not mandatory in every jurisdiction, it is nevertheless important as a globally recognized standard for test reports to be accepted in over 80 countries around the world. Reports indicate that out of over 5,349 medical laboratories in Nigeria, less than 10 have ISO 15189 certification. This situation has been described as unacceptable by various health professionals. However, more laboratories in the country have ISO 17025 certification, which is an older version, and since it was last published in 2005, a lot has changed in market conditions and technology. This scenario is evidence that Nigeria has a long journey ahead in strengthening medical and public health laboratory science capacity in Nigeria. The quality of diagnosis in most Nigerian laboratories has also been attributed to reports of medical errors in these labs posing great danger to human lives. How significant is proper certification for medical laboratories in Nigeria? How can the country ensure standardization? Guests on Good Morning Nigeria will be speaking to the issues in a moment.
Many thanks, Kenan Dulwe, for that backgrounder. Of course, the questions you posed will also form part of the interrogation of the issue with our guests who are here with us in the studios and also joining us from remote locations. First, with us in the Abuja studios, let's welcome Dr. Tosan Irabo. He is the Registrar and CEO of the Medical Laboratory Science Council of Nigeria. Dr. Irabo, pleasure to have you with us this morning.
It's nice being here this morning. Good morning, Nigerians.
Also here with us in the Abuja studios, would like to welcome Usman Habu Balbaya. He's Director Medical Laboratory Services at Nizamiye Hospital in Abuja. Balbaya, pleasure to have you this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
Adabo?
Yep. And joining us from Benin Network Center in Edo State is Professor Francis Fadule, consultant pathologist and immediate past president, Nigerian Medical Association. Good to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Very much. Good morning. It's my pleasure.
Thank you so very much. We also have joining us from Denmark via Zoom is Professor James Demen, National President, Association of Medical Laboratory Scientists of Nigeria. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Yeah, good morning.
All right, gentlemen, once again, I'd like to have you all join us at the commencement of the program, which was around about 35 minutes or more ago. My colleague and I were just indicating the value of medical labs and the specimens that are taken in there for analysis and how all of that normally would help with the diagnosis, cure, and treatment of patients. But we do know that the numbers, including what our reporter just indicated in the background report, that the numbers are not salutary. From amongst some 5,000 medical labs in the country, fewer than 10 are said to meet the latest ISO standards. Why are we in this condition, Dr. Irabo?
Good morning, Nigerians. First, let's put the record straight. The 5,000 plus that is being paraded, I don't know where they got it from, because the Medical Laboratory Science Council of Nigeria is the statutory agency responsible for the practice and services of medical laboratory issues in Nigeria. This is contained in Act 11 of 2003, Cap M25, Laws of Federal Republic of Nigeria. The actual figure in our database is 3,674. Secondly, on the issue of less than 10 laboratories in Nigeria having ISO 1589 2012 is not also correct. As the regulatory body in Nigeria, we have, as a council, which is the national accrediting body, we have accredited 11 facilities to ISO 15189 as we speak this morning. And we also have 9 others from other organizations like SANAS, NINAS, who have also accredited 9 facilities to ISO 15189 in this country. We are not saying that that is where we want to be, but let's put the record straight. And why are we where we are? It's just the political will to get to where we want to be. As a country, as an organization, there are a lot of regulations that we are putting in place that laboratories in Nigeria should key into accreditation process. It is also important for us to know that accreditation is not compulsory, it's voluntary. And since it's voluntary, you see that there will be the classical attitude of people key into it. But it is important for us to note that with this coming up of this less than 20 that we have, and with the advocacy put in place by the Medical Laboratory Science Council of Nigeria, who is an affiliate member of ILAC, a lot of laboratories are already key into this accreditation process. And accreditation does not just happen in 1 week or 6 weeks. It takes a minimum of between 18 to 24 months for an organization that is ready to talk quality. So we are having not less than about 30 with the advocacy that we have now, who have done what we call a baseline. Baseline is when we go to assess where your facility is. Then from there, we identify gaps. And from that gaps, you will be expected to move on with mentors and will follow you to where you are getting accreditation. So we are also taking or working in the direction that the federal government of Nigeria, in collaboration with the MLSCN, should be able to do or have a deliberate policy to our own institutions, that is teaching hospitals, primary medical centers, specialist hospitals, before we start talking of the states, at least to say, let's engage into this accreditation process for Nigerians to get the best of quality service. Without an accredited facility, the idea of going outside Nigeria for medical checkup will not be achieved. Because what we are doing outside, if we get it here, it will be cheaper for this country. And most of these health services they are getting from outside Nigeria are mainly the laboratory aspect, which is 70%, which is what is needed for the clinician to treat and monitor our patients. So as a country, we need to look inward, and I assure you, if the teaching hospitals key to it, and the specialized hospital key to it, in the next 24 months, the narrative of this less than 20 will change. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Irabo. Registrar of Medical Laboratories Science Council of Nigeria. The revelations are really not good to hear, talking about the voluntariness of accreditation of such a very important body. But we'll get back to that later because you are the regulators of this very profession. Let's hear from, Professor James, the National President, Association of Medical Laboratory Scientists of Nigeria. I'm throwing back this question to you. Earlier asked Dr. Irabo, why are we where we are?
Good morning, Nigeria. I want to thank you, very important, for inviting me to this program. I want to state here very clearly that we are nowhere when it comes to issue of medical laboratory practice in Nigeria. I am speaking to you from Denmark. I am here attending the 34th World Congress of International Federation of Biomedical Laboratory Science, where you have stakeholders of medical laboratory practice all over the world. We gathered and we are sharing experiences on how medical laboratory practice is actually carried out in our country. And let me tell you, when you listen to what is happening in other countries, you are ashamed to even tell them what is happening in your own country. The registrar of our Medical Laboratory Science Council of Nigeria said that accreditation should not be made compulsory. But to me, government should come up with a policy that if you must attend to Nigerians, if Nigeria must come to your laboratory, there must be standards. We owe Nigerians to give them quality medical laboratory services. The hallmark of quality health services all depends on the quality of the result that is actually produced in our various laboratories. And so government should actually come up with policy, whether it's public or a private medical laboratory. Any Nigerian, any person that is going into your laboratory, you must have a standard laboratory that can be able to give a result that will go a long way in helping the patient, because everything is actually based on the laboratory. The clinician is inadequate, is handicapped when the correct laboratory result is not produced, because everything that the clinician will actually do on a patient will actually depend on scientific data. And this scientific data are actually generated in the laboratory. And laboratory is one of the professions that is not properly organized. We have not been, the government of Nigeria have not been given proper attention to the laboratory in terms of, ensuring that laboratory is properly organized. I keep on saying that it starts from even the leadership of the laboratory. We have an act, just like the registrar said, the Medical Laboratory Science Council of Nigeria Act 11 of 2003 clearly spell out who manage the laboratory. But go to our laboratory, you discover that the laboratory are not coordinated. They are not even headed by qualified medical laboratory scientists. So when you now bring in somebody that does not even know what it takes to have a laboratory, and you now said that person should be the head of a laboratory, it creates a lot of problem. Accreditation is the key thing. The presentations we have here, all the research that people conducted in all their laboratories and they are sharing, the research are conducted in accredited laboratories in various countries. And like you said, the number of laboratories that are accredited in Nigeria is not acceptable by we, the professionals in medical laboratory. And my own concern is the federal government of Nigeria, we must be able to look at the law that established the laboratory, who is supposed to man the laboratory, because you cannot give what you don't have. And so the issue is bringing the right people to head the laboratory so that we can be able to also make submission in terms of the right equipment, in terms of the right infrastructure, in terms of, there are many, accreditation is a combination of many factors. But the key thing has to start with the leadership of the laboratory. Once you get the right leadership of the laboratory, all the other things can be in place. And so we need to, there are many factors that is actually affecting many laboratories. That is why our laboratories are where we are. If you are here, you will discover that if you conduct a research in our own laboratory and you want to come and present it in this type of congress, because look, people have gone very, very high. They have gone very far. The technology here that they are talking about doing simple investigation, you wonder when we'll get there. But the ultimate aim is that if government have the willpower, we have the right personnel, and we have the right leadership to be able to give government correct submission, we will get there.
So, Professor James Damen, thank you very much. But Nadabo, I mean, you and I here on this program, they call on government at all times, government, have the political will. Is government going to now also be the medical lab scientist? No. It's government. Nadabo, you understand my puzzle. You say, oh, government have the political will to run the economy, have political will to create a reliable power sector, have political will. What are the practitioners themselves doing? Listening to Dr. Tosan Irabo a while ago, while he was giving us in his opinion, of course being the registrar of the council, the actual figures, it said 20, probably just 20 out of 3,674 medical labs in the country.
Oh, 5,000.
No, he said 5,000 is not correct. He said 5,000 is not correct. Right. Now, he said 20, because some 11 of them are ISO certified, and then 9 others thereabout. Let's say 20 out of 3,674. That is 0.5%, not 5%, half percent, not 50%, half. If you were to have all the medical labs in the country, the ones that are actually certified, 0.5%, and we're asking the question, because I thought we'll bring in Professor Fadule. And by the way, Professor Fadule, congratulations on your professorial elevation, and then of course the Nizami director who is here. Let's get this clear between James Damen and Tosan Irabo here with us in the studios. When you say that accreditation of medical lab is voluntary and not compulsory, what are the steps in setting up a medical lab? I have no training whatsoever in medical science or medical laboratory science, and then can I just set up a medical lab? And then I said accreditation is voluntary, so business as usual.
Thank you. Let's get it clear. Accreditation process is a third-party activity to decide that that facility has the competency to give you quality results. For you to set up a laboratory in Nigeria in line with MLSN guidelines, first you apply. And that is a letter of intent. Then MLSN has a checklist, which we call pre-approval checklist for it to set up a facility. What do we check for? The personnel. Is the personnel there that is good? The personnel that will be working in that facility, are they medical lab scientists? Are they trained? Do they have license to practice? Did they attend continuous professional development? So that the result that you'll be generating will be acceptable. We'll look at your infrastructure. Do you have a good infrastructure? Do we have do you have equipment and safety issues? We also come to say, this laboratory, is it key into what we call external quality assurance? which means tests are brought from other places and compared to what you are doing? Are you using the appropriate reagents? Well, are you going to be using appropriate reagents in that facility, which is validated by by in vitro diagnostic laboratory in our lab in Yaba, Lagos? Is your equipment calibrated for it to be used properly to give you the actual result? By the time we look at all this, and you are able to make 80% of the checklist in what we call accreditation process, a one-star process, you'll be given approval to commence laboratory practice in Nigeria. That is the process of getting the lab. That does not exclude you, a businessman or a non-medical lab scientist, not to own your own facility. In doing that, you are expected to have an MOU with the medical laboratory scientists who will be there, because we will not be able to hold you, who's a businessman, for any lapses or any wrong result that will come from the place. It is the medical laboratory scientists that we will hold responsible. So once you have an MOU and you meet that requirement, we ask you to commence laboratory practice in Nigeria.
Laboratory practice or business?
Laboratory business.
Laboratory business in Nigeria.
Because even non-professionals
yes, you can do that. So once you have that, that is the minimal requirement for you. And finally, we'll say you must have elements of quality management system, which comprises the 12 elements. By the time you have that as basis, you can commence laboratory business in our country, Nigeria.
Okay, Dr. Tosan, we shall get back to you later in the course of this conversation, because it seems you've raised a lot of issues that needs interrogation here. But we've got to look at them one by one. Professor Francis Faduile is in our Benin Network Center, and of course, let's get his views about these issues that have been raised. And Prof, the NMA and then the Medical Laboratory Scientists Association of Nigeria are all in the business of saving lives. And of course, it all starts from the lab, that is knowing what exactly the patient is going through and what his problems are. The question here is, as we've already asked at the beginning, we've gotten to a stage that it's becoming very unacceptable for Nigerians and, even outsiders that attend to Nigerians about the results of our tests and, of course, the standard or the state of our, or status of our laboratories. What's your feeling about this, and what do you think brought us to this stage? Let me get back to that again, because that's the establishment.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Nigerians. There are some very important things we need to clear. And one of them is that, yes, we have the Medical Laboratory Council of Nigeria and their regulatory body who look after the laboratory set up by lab scientists. I must also inform you that we have pathologists who are medical doctors primarily and who have undergone another 6 to 7 years training in laboratory medicine. Up to 2003, the Medical Laboratory Council membership has 4 pathologists within their council members, and in fact, as their chairman. It was in 2003 that we have the law review and all the pathologists were expunged. And what has that caused to Nigeria? That has caused a great rift between the laboratory scientists as well as the pathologists. You hear when the president of the Association of Medical Lab Scientists said that we have personnel who knows next to nothing within the laboratory. And I think these are some of the problems that we are facing that is causing division within the fabrics of laboratory science and laboratory medicine in Nigeria. Now back to accreditation. Accreditation is needed because we need to ensure that the results that come out from our laboratory are precise, are accurate, and can be used effectively by other physicians who are working or who are looking after patients. Secondly, there is this erroneous view too that for you to start treating patients, you start treating patients from laboratory results. And I say no. As a physician, there are so many steps you have to pass through, and the results from the laboratory can actually serve as an adjunct to making up decision. Physicians do not treat results. They actually treat a patient. And the results that come from this laboratory must be supportive to the treatment that the patients are needed. So, unfortunately also, because we have this sharp division, we have not been able to sit together, because even if we are calling ISO standard, it is also important for every country to domesticate its own standardization. Today, we have not been able to sit down because we find ourselves fighting on who heads, or fighting on who should do this or who should do that. It is high time we all decided to help the patient in Nigeria and drop all these views of pathologists cannot be in laboratory, lab scientists will start fighting, and pathology will say no, this is this, this is that. These are things we really need to live and have the interest of our patient, which is the primary reason why we are all in the hospital or in the health services. The president who says he is in Denmark and they are having great meeting, yes, these are part of the continuous medical examination, medical training that we are looking for. And I can tell you, pathologists also have a lot of discussions. I am a professor in pathology. There are a lot of my papers that were based on the laboratory. There were a lot of professors of chemical pathology, of other areas in pathology that use results from those laboratories. However, we must ensure that the government, again, does the needful, ensuring that the laboratories in Nigeria are properly certified. We have a case in which all Tom, Dick and Harry open a laboratory, churn out results. We cannot verify it. We cannot sure, or we cannot authenticate it, and we cannot be sure if it's valuable to supporting the treatment of the patient. Lastly, I must say to my colleagues, it is important we work together for the patients. The issue of pathologists cannot be in laboratory, lab scientists is the head. I think these are issues that we should deviate from bringing to fore, because internationally, pathologists work in the laboratory. They work hand in hand with scientists. I have worked as a pathologist in developed countries. I have been in Australia where they have very great support. I've worked in US. I've worked in other developed countries where there are no rifts. And I think this is what we should work together, sit down together, and see how we can improve the health facilities in this country.
Thank you very much, Professor Faduile, for your opening comments. We're back again to the same old squabbles. Professional rivalry in the medical field. I mean, you're talking now about medical lab scientists and pathologists. On the one hand, you have another quarrel between physicians and pharmacists. That one will come up. So all kinds of, at some point again, you will have quarrels between physicians and nurses, and then the nurses and pharmacists, all kinds of it. This one doesn't require the government's political will. It requires the will of the practitioners themselves, I would say. Now, Usman Balbaya, of course, you've been listening to the other guests, make their comments on all of this. Yes. At the end of the day, while all these squabbles are going on, we do know that, one, it is the health of the patient that suffers. If there's no good or proper diagnosis, and the physician cannot get a pathway, the right pathway to more enhanced treatment, this is what goes on. And then, of course, those who say, look, no, don't rely on anything here, go out, that's capital flight. But what has been your experience at Nismaye Hospital with regard to medical lab services, and from your interaction with your colleagues as well, what are the issues that we should consider?
Yeah, actually, for the record, Nigerian Hospital is an international-based hospital. So I would like to say that rivalry of a thing is non-existent. As a director of medical laboratory services, I have my boundaries, and the doctors know their boundaries also. Whatever decision they want to make regarding the laboratory, they seek for my opinion, and I make like 90 to 95% of some of the decision regarding the management of the laboratory, because they have seen leadership domicile in the laboratory as a key in progress of that very particular laboratory. Basically, that is my experience, and I want to believe it because it is an international base. The reason he stated, the last presenter stated, actually is true. It's part of the problems we're having in Nigeria, the interprofessional rivalry. And for the record, let me back on my CEO's comments. 70% of clinical decisions is from medical laboratory results taken by the clinicians. This is not his statement, this is not my statement, this is an international statement. You can check. You understand? This is not only showing that one profession is bigger than the other, it is only showing the importance of a reliable quality laboratory result. That is what it is only showing. Some of the challenges, let me shed more light on what I perceive as some of our challenges. Like you said, we are always talking about the government aspect. We are not talking about the personal aspect. I think commitment is a challenge. Commitment to quality, commitment to the process, and what have you. Commitment in the side of me as a professional, as a medical laboratory scientist, on the side of my organization, as an organization, are they committed to achieving quality results? And in the side of also the government also, though the government and the Medical Laboratory Sciences Council of Nigeria already has a regulation and is in place. I believe if there is commitment, everybody will pursue it and get it done. And another thing, like you mentioned, is attention. Attention in the side of the government, attention in the side of the personnel, and attention also in the side of the end user. The end user, they are not enlightened enough. Our people in Nigeria, they are not much enlightened enough to put their attention to what they receive, to where they go for quality care, and what type of result they receive. More attention is being given to result being generated than a quality result being generated.
Explain that.
Okay, when I go to the hospital, my main concern is for my result to be ready. It's generated, but what is the status of that result? I don't care about that one. I just get my result and go for the doctor for treatment.
Why should I care about the mechanics of how the results are produced in the first instance?
I just want to really ask.
Yeah, that's not. If a patient walks in,
yes.
If the patient doesn't just walk into the lab, it's a referral that the patient gets, and then they say, okay, all right, we need your specimen, stool, urine, blood, or whatever, or skin snip, and then you go in there, and the patient, who is not an expert in that field, doesn't need to care how you deal with your work. That's your business.
Well, I think it's not only the business or the personal, it's your business also as the end user, because this result
It's for you.
It's for you. You understand? Where I go for my medical check or the laboratory I go to do my check and the result I receive. There is this perception that a patient cannot even ask too much questions, cannot inquire about anything. Some of the health personnel have this attitude of, if you ask too much question on a result, they tend to perceive that, okay, you want to challenge me, or it's an I too know attitude, which is not like that.
Well, the fact is that you start having this, the normal cliche in Nigeria that, are you going to teach me my job?
Exactly.
And that's all about the profession, all right?
But it's also the duty of the health personnel, you understand, to explain to the patient whatever concerns he has professionally on the result or not.
Hang on a second, Balbaya. I know that Professor Fadule may wish to respond to this. Is this part of, the interconnectedness and then the tough rivalry that we're talking about? Who refers me to the medical lab? It's a physician. Or do I just walk into, I'm just giving an example. Do I just walk into a medical lab and say, look, I want to do a blood test? If I want to do a blood, there are many things that it can be ascertained, when your, excuse me, when your blood sample is taken. So is it the business of the medical lab person to be explaining to me the result that I have received?
That is not what I am saying.
What are you saying?
That is not what I'm saying. It's not the business of medical laboratory scientists to explain a result to you. What, as of instance, is a possibility. For example, let me give you an example. I went to a hospital and I have a test result that says I don't have malaria. And then I'm having some symptoms. I then went to another hospital and have a test result in another laboratory, and it comes out that I have 2+ malaria. I think at this stage, I can ask the medical laboratory scientist, I don't understand, I'm having 2 results. One is saying positive, one is saying negative. You understand? The medical laboratory scientist in that aspect should be able to explain to you why he feels what he did is okay and the result he's issuing out is okay. Let me set a point here. Nigerians have a culture of not going to the hospital at the first time. When they have symptoms, they either go to the pharmacy and get some drugs, or they go straight to the laboratory and say, I'm having symptoms of malaria, and then I want to test. On that status, the medical laboratory scientist should be able to explain himself and prove himself. On another aspect that you're talking about, if a hospital settings, he goes to the laboratory, of course, he collects the result, and then he goes and sees the doctor. But so that is the angle I'm coming out from.
These are instances where you need to really have to compare results. That is when the patient now asks questions, because he feels it, and he's now seeing 2 different tests, and he doesn't seem to, which one would he believe? But all the same, we shall get back to that later. Let's come back to Dr. Tosin Irabo here and look at this issue. We are looking at the standardization of laboratories in Nigeria. And your council is in charge of regulating these laboratories in this country. You've already shed more light on how to register, on how to get your laboratory, established. And there are some, questions there that needs to be interrogated, some issues that need to be interrogated. And these are issues of verification becoming voluntary, that is one. And, accreditation, becoming voluntary. And then secondly, the tedious nature of, the process. And the third issue I want you to really comment on is having this whole all-important, aspect of our human lives and health open to everybody, which means a businessman can establish it, given the fact that he can get the required personnel to man it and things like that. Now, these are factors which, to a layman, points to the fact that that is where we are. How would you respond?
Okay. First, let me respond by first letting you know that the ISO 15189 now has been domesticated in Nigeria by Standard Organization. It's now known as NIS ISO 15189 2019 by SON. And that is the standard that the Medical Laboratories Council of Nigeria is using. And that is the standard worldwide for medical laboratories. Your question, in other climes, like in South Africa, 80% of accredited laboratories, medical laboratories, are privately owned. They are businessmen, not government. Government just is just a few percentage. Because the private person, because he's committed, is into a business, he can walk through the process of accreditation, knowing fully well that at the end, the results that is being generated from that is or a facility will be accepted worldwide. Like what he was trying to explain, that the customer, which is the patient, needs to know where he seeks medical care. In some climes, I can go to hospital A. Because that hospital A, the medical laboratory facility is there, is not accredited to ISO 15189. It's not sure of the results, like we have been saying. The patient deserves the rights to say, take my sample to an accredited laboratory, so that he or she is sure of the reproducibility and the quality of the results that is going to come out from that laboratory. And my president misquoted when I said accreditation is voluntary. In accreditation process, as defined by ALAC, you are not to force anyone to go into accreditation. It's a voluntary exercise. I did put a proviso, and I said, for us to change the narrative for where we are today, that in the next 24 months, the federal government of Nigeria, or Federal Minister of Health, in collaboration with Medical Laboratories Council of Nigeria, should put up a deliberate policy to our chief medical directors and MDs that we want you to key into accreditation so we can change the narrative. That was the proviso I put at the beginning. So I did not say because it's voluntary and people should not take it. Because of where we are today, it's become imperative that the government of Nigeria or the Federal Minister of Health should look at the direction of accreditation.
How much has the council been doing in this regard? Because that is the beginning, that's the root cause.
Like I said in my opening, our advocacy has yielded the number we have today. And I also said we have more than 30 facilities we have done baseline for. And advocacy is continuous. As I speak to you today, I have an advocacy tool which have been developed by the council, which we are using to reach out to organizations to see the importance why they must embrace accreditation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tosan Erabo. I want Professor Faduile, I would like you to speak to this issue. I mean, apart from accreditation, what ordinarily should be the standard operational practice in a medical lab? Because part of our experience, and that of course has also been referred to by Baya here with us in the Abuja studios, is that anybody can apparently just walk into any roadside or street side medical lab and indicate to you, as you said, look, I'm having signs of malaria. And they take your sample or whatever it is, give you a result, and then the next question probably they will be asking is that, which malaria drug did you take before you came here? When was the last time you took it? Okay, don't take that one. They now start performing all kinds of functions that are outside of their boundaries. So what ordinarily should be the standard procedure for practice of a medical laboratory operator?
Thank you very much. I think you actually hit the chord when you ask, is it the patient who determines what test he or she wants to do? And the simple answer is no. It is the medical practitioner, the physician, who sees a patient, who after doing a physical examination and taking the history, will determine the type of test that that patient will need. And the result of that test should be given back to the physician, who will now interpret it with other things that he has seen based on his clinical history, based on his examination, and formulate a management plan after making the diagnosis. It is very erroneous. I have never seen worldwide where you encourage patients to say, okay, is this my result? Is it my result authentic? And you'll be comparing results. It is not done. This is a Nigeria factor. Secondly, it is not even right for any other fellow who has not requested initially for any test for you to be saying, look, let me try to explain. I think it's beyond the duty of even the physician, the pathologist within the hospital. I'm a pathologist, I apply my trade. When I make diagnosis and the patient wants to ask what is the next thing, I say, go back to your doctor, he will explain, because I have not seen you in totality. So that being as it may, I must also state that this 70% as quoted by that my friend is obviously within the literature, but it has no scientific basis. I challenge him. We have papers that I have quickly looked through, and it has no scientific basis. I am not trying in any way to say that the duty of laboratory is not important in diagnosis, but we must be able to state our fact. Some of the things that we have seen in Nigeria is just when you are sick, go to one lab, go to the pharmacist. These are abnormal, and we should all come together and say, for you, if you are sick, go and see a doctor. There are so many people or patients who visit the physician and they do not need them to do investigation. The diagnosis is made and they treat. And again, I must say, Medical Laboratories Council of Nigeria accredits only laboratory run by medical laboratory scientists. I am a pathologist, and I have my own accreditation council, which is the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria. But we really need to work together. That is the underlying thing we must look at. I stated that up to 2003, this convergence of activity was in place. It was in 2003 that we know that the law was now brought up, where we don't want to say that things that have passed, let us leave it and let us look into the future. But there are so many misinformation out there to patients that we need to correct. We need to all jointly sit down and correct it. Thirdly, I must also say that it is also voluntary that you go through accreditation. I may decide to go through accreditation or standardization through any other means. It does not mean that we have only one accreditation body. So I'm happy that he said the SON has domesticated the ISO ISO standard. Good. And we will have other accreditation bodies. All we are trying to do is to see that the results that come from the laboratories are good, are accurate, and can support the treatment of our patients. I want to say that the duty of pathologists in the lab, like my director from the laboratory has said, also included being there, looking at the results, as well as relating the clinical basis and giving advice to clinicians. And all this one works perfectly in developed countries where there are standards and there are checks and balances.
So very much, Professor Francis. We are pressed for time, really, and we have a couple of minutes remaining. Let's move quickly to Denmark and then meet Professor, James Diamond. So many issues have been raised. As I was discussing with my colleague in the studio here, this very topic requires another look, but at least let's hear from you finally. Issues have been put forward here, so many of them indeed. What has the association been doing in trying to see to it that these very issues raised, which are really germane, are addressed, looking at accreditation, looking at the quackery issue, looking at the rivalry between, pathologists and lab scientists, and equipments and reagents and things like that. What has the association been doing finally in this regard, and where to see to it that Nigerian patients, or Nigerians generally who suffer from one element or the other, and need to go to the lab, get out of the wood?
Yeah, okay, I want to appreciate you for this question. The position of our association is that we would love that all laboratories in Nigeria undergo through accreditation. The importance of accredited laboratory cannot be overemphasized. If you do an investigation, the laboratory that is accredited is not only for conducting investigation for patients. You can also use accredited laboratory to do a lot of research that can actually help government in making policies. And so once a laboratory is accredited, it simply means that the outcome of that laboratory is accurate, is reliable, and it can be reproducible in any other part of the world. And that is where quality actually comes to be. Now, pertaining the role of medical pathologists in a laboratory, as an individual, if you ask me, I will say yes, pathologists have a role in a laboratory. But the role that they have in the laboratory is distinct, is different from the role of a medical laboratory scientist. The medical laboratory scientist, based on the training and even the license that he practiced, he is supposed to be in charge of the laboratory. He is supposed to be in charge of, procurement of all the reagent equipment in the laboratory, and he is supposed to be in charge of the day-to-day running of the laboratory. I am also very happy that I attended this conference because you will see, practitioners from different parts of the world. They are also sharing their own experiences. Like Professor Martina yesterday, she's from Denmark, that actually gave a presentation. She's a medical lab scientist. They call them biomedical laboratory scientists. She's a consultant. She's appointed as a consultant. But back home, if you now apply as a medical lab scientist, even as a professor, and you said, appoint me as a consultant, they will now say no. And it is actually the pathologists conniving with the chief medical directors, and they block chances for medical lab scientists to be appointed as a consultant. And this is actually happening there. Some of them here, you discover that like Lina is a director of a laboratory. Some of them in some countries, they are managers of the laboratories, and anything that has to do with the laboratory, it is actually the biomedical scientist that is actually, but when you go home, so pathologist is supposed to serve as an interface between the laboratory and the and the clinicians. And also pathologists too, they are expected to even run clinic because the license they have is actually to manage patients. Anything that has to do with laboratory investigation, even the heading of the, do you know that up till now, when government, that's why I keep on saying that government should have the willpower, because when the leadership of the laboratory is not properly defined, it becomes a problem. We have an act that defines all those things. We approached National Industrial Court of Nigeria. About 14 judgments has so far been given. And they always told pathologists, if it is laboratory, managing laboratory, everything, it is the duty of the medical laboratory scientist. But government failed to have that willpower and say, okay, implement CMDs, MDs, implement the court judgment. So, and that is why I am saying that if government have the willpower, we should be able to, everybody want quality. today we are health professionals. Tomorrow you can be a patient. And all that we want is that any time a patient comes to any facility, he should be given the best, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of religion, regardless. All that we want is that we stand for quality. Quality management system is our keyword, and we always emphasize that to all our people, whether it's public or it's private. But permit me to also say that why I always say government is that out of those labs, I want you to ask the registrar, out of the labs that are accredited, how many of them are public? And if you go to our hospital, you discover that the laboratory that is supported by the PEFA, that is supported by US government fund, in the same hospital, go and see the equipment there, go and see the structure of how those labs are run, compared to the lab that is owned by the hospital, which is government-owned lab in that same hospital. Compare the two labs. You will now know that we have a serious problem in the laboratory. And that is why we keep on saying that once you have the leadership of the laboratory, it will go a long way in solving all these problems.
Professor James Dame, thank you very much there for the points that you have raised. I mean, we're not going to have a catalog of problems. It is how we are going to solve those problems so that, we deal with this critical aspect of our healthcare system. I don't know, we are pressed for time now, but I would like you to speak to this very briefly, Dr. Tosan Irabo. When you say that to establish a medical lab, this is the checklist. After I satisfy 80% of that, and I'll set up my lab. Who undertakes the oversight of medical laboratories once they are now a going concern? In other words, once I begin to run my medical lab, who comes around on oversight function? And then, what am I supposed to satisfy when you come for your oversight? And if I don't meet your oversight, do you close me down? Yes. And whose business is it? Is it your own council? Is it state management, hospital business? Whose responsibility is it? Because you see, there are some medical labs you go to, and you're asking yourself whether this one is actually a medical lab. The environment itself is potentially likely to even contaminate samples. You go to their washrooms, and their washrooms are rotten.
Exactly the angle it's coming from.
Thank you.
Very briefly.
Very briefly.
Yes.
But however, before I take that...
No, just take it because we are pressed for time.
Yes, I will take it.
Yes.
The answer is simple. It's the Medical Laboratories Council of Nigeria who does the monitoring of these laboratories that have been set up. We come and check. If you're not performing within our requirement, your facility will be shut down. I wanted to put a statement clear that Professor said. In Act 11 of 2003, Section 19D, it is specific that the Medical Laboratories Council of Nigeria has the statutory function to determine quality of private and public laboratories, including those adjoined to clinics. I don't know where he's getting his powers from, but I'm telling you, the laws of Federal Republic of Nigeria, it is 19D, you can check it off. And for you to, after establishing your facility, the Medical Laboratories Council of Nigeria do random monitoring of those facilities.
Okay.
It is from there we now encourage you, do an advocacy to you to say it is wise, it is important for you to get proper services that you go into accreditation or what we call certification. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tosan Irabo, Registrar Medical Laboratory Science Council of Nigeria. There are so many issues here, and I think we need to get back to this topic sometime, someday. It's a pleasure being here this morning. Usman Habu Balbaya, Director of Medical Laboratory Services, Nizamiya Hospital, Abuja. It's our pleasure being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Professor Francis Faduile, Consultant Pathologist and immediate past President, Nigerian Medical Association. Thank you for being part of this program this morning. And we appreciate you also, Professor James Dame, National President, Association of Medical Laboratory Scientists of Nigeria, who spoke to us from Denmark. We wish you a very successful conference. We are now going to take a break. Our second topic is really beckoning, and after the break, we'll get back to that. Stay with us.